Welcome everyone to another episode of Para Spotlight. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Roemer. I'm the manager for membership engagement at Para. And as I said today, we have a new episode of Para Spotlight. The topic of today's webinar is Can Sustainable Tourism Regenerate Nature? And we've partnered with our member ANIMONDIAL, and our speakers for today are Daniel Turner, who is the co-founder and director of ANIMONDIAL, and we have Prue, who is the head of sustainability at Explore Worldwide. And then last but not least, we have Stephan Roemer, who is the CEO of Diethelm Travel Group. So before we jump into the topic, I would like to say a few words about the housekeeping for today. As you see, actually, we have the three speakers for today, and then we have our moderator, Paul Brunkan, Director of Communications and External Affairs at PADA, who will lead our panel discussion and Q&A session later. So we will hear presentations from all three of our speakers, and that is then being followed by, as I said, a panel or Q&A session. So for that, we all need your involvement. Whenever you have questions, feel free to ask them. As always, please do it in the Q&A box, which you will find normally at the bottom of your screen. There is a Q&A box. Please don't use the chat function as it gets messy in there and then we'll miss some of your questions. So use the Q&A box for your questions. And then if we have the time, we will try to answer as many as we can towards the end of the webinar after the presentations. Another thing that we always get asked, is the presentation available after the webinar? So the recording will be available on the PADA YouTube channel. So you can share it after, you can rewatch it after that's available. Second question that people like to ask is there certificates for this webinar? And as usual, if you're a PADA Youth member and you register with your PADA ID, PADA Youth ID, you will get a certificate within a week after this webinar. I hope this answers all questions. If I forgot anything or you have any extra questions, please feel free to ask them. You can ask general questions in the chat box as well. My colleagues are happy to help and answer any during the webinar. So I would say, without further ado, I would like to welcome all our speakers, and we're starting with Daniel Turner's presentation of the day. Hello, good morning, Daniel.
Good morning and good afternoon, and thank you, Rune and Paul and Pata for this opportunity today. So let me just, I just need to be able to share the slides. Thank you very much. So hopefully everybody can see the slides and we haven't got technical issues up front. So today is Earth Day. I don't know whether you all know that, but it is a bookmark in the year to consider our actions as businesses, but also individuals, and the likely negative impact that we may well have on the natural environment and of course overall planet health. We are of course regularly reminded about climate change and COVID-19 very much in our minds at the moment. These are all direct causes of negative impact on the natural environment and the planet. But importantly, there is hope. And today's presentation aims to consider the impact of tourism on the natural world, and importantly, how as travel businesses, we can better manage our activities with animals and nature, and ultimately ensure their better protection. So a little bit about me. don't know whether this. So I am an environmental biologist. I've been working in applied animal welfare science for 20 years or so. And a lot of that time I've been working with the travel industry to develop guidance and trainings to help people better understand the complexities of the topic and solve the problems that we face on a daily basis. Working with my friend and colleague, Helen Usher, who is an social impact specialist, we created the consultancy ANIMONDIAL about 3 years ago. And ultimately, we work with travel businesses, but we importantly also work with non-profit organizations in communities across global destinations, marrying up, if you like, matchmaking between the businesses and the NGOs to ensure a more meaningful change when it comes to community-based conservation. Overall, we provide impartial and practical guidance that help you with your decision-making on all matters concerning animals in tourism, not just the welfare of the animals, but also biodiversity issues and leading to the overarching concerns such as climate change. So we're here today to talk about animals in tourism, and the tour operators amongst you will know that there is a whole variety of different types of activities involving animals that are available to you to sell and include in your itineraries and tours. We estimate that about 60% of all excursions involve animals to some degree. And recently, the UNWTO estimated that in the Asia Pacific, 96% of tours involve animals and/or nature. That is staggering. But let's look at the different types of activities that are available to you. There is the viewing of wildlife in their natural environments, whether that's below water or life on land. And you can do that from afar and not have much impact, or you can be up close and personal and are likely to have significant impact. There is also the wild animals that are kept in a captive environment, and this includes the zoos, the animal sanctuaries, and the elephant camps like you see here. These animals are very much reliant on their keepers, owners, to understand their needs and provide for them. And then lastly, there is the domesticated animal that is used largely for working practices, carrying people or loads. And you've not just got to think about the animal issue, but also particularly the people involved in that activity too. So overall, these are the type of animal activities that you as travel businesses have direct control over, and also responsibility to ensure that those animals have a good life, a life worth living, ensuring that their welfare is provided, but also that the people involved are protected from physical injury and disease. So ultimately, you have the means to decide what you sell and what you don't sell. But there are also other animals that you need to consider, and these animals are found in all the destinations that you visit. They're largely the animals that are involved in cultural practices, but even more so now, particularly in the last 15 years, as people want to have that close-up personal engagement with unusual animals and different wildlife is that there is the opportunist that offers people the opportunity to ride or hold or have photographs with wild animals. Here you have less control because obviously you're not offering these activities as part of your itineraries, but ultimately your guests are exposed to them. There are risks involved, and you do have a responsibility for your guests' welfare. So it's important to understand what is available, but also that you do have the power of influence on the destination if there are concerns with your guests. And just by sending those concerns to the National Tourist Board could have a positive effect on the issue of concern. So of all those different types of animal activities, if the right decision is not made and tourism ultimately has a negative impact on the animals or the environment in which they live, then unfortunately there is significant impact to consider and ultimately try to mitigate. And it is proven that tourism can largely exploit individual animals, but also whole species, have a negative impact on the natural environments where they live, and ultimately lead to biodiversity and other issues such as climate change. So it is whilst the individual animal is always important, and for me, as a person who has been driving forward the importance of animal welfare for over 20 years, if there is not the ability to recognize that an individual animal is sentient in the sense that they can experience pain, suffering, and distress, then really everything that goes in following that, the importance of animal populations, the species, the biodiversity, and so on, and nature, really pales into insignificance because you've got to protect that individual in order to protect those wider issues. So protecting animals in tourism and the natural habitats where they reside is important to planetary health and ultimately has wider repercussions. So not protecting the individual could ultimately cause biodiversity loss. This can lead to habitat degradation. Animals become threatened and are used in all sorts of exploitation, illegal wildlife trade, which opens up, dissolves the barrier of the natural barrier that nature provides and exposes humans and other animals to unknown diseases such as COVID, and ultimately breaks down the whole fabric of the planet, leading to climate change. So the wider implications are significant. But there's always a but. If managed well, tourism can really have a huge benefit to nature and the animals and plants within it. As you can see from the slide in front of you, wildlife tourism generates huge revenues, employs huge numbers of people across the world, less now, unfortunately, but obviously going to increase with time. Whole nations depend on wildlife tourism, and estimated by the World Economic Forum, the benefit that nature provides us as human beings, but also the planet, equals to that huge figure of $44 trillion, but from my perspective, priceless. Over the pandemic, we saw tourism plummet, but we also saw animal exploitation increase, from hunting and poaching in the wild to large numbers of animals traded through illegal wildlife trade. Tourism is relevant because tourism can bring value to nature and the natural environment and ultimately influence its better protection. So, as travel businesses, how can you better protect animals in tourism? So, step one, have a look at all the different types of activities that you sell as travel businesses across all your destinations and identify the high risk. By high risk, I mean where people are having direct engagement, direct contact with wild animals. So animals of wild species, basically. Wild species are naturally unpredictable and therefore dangerous. So this would be considered high risk, not just for the individual animals, their welfare, but also for the people involved. Step two, consider your commitment. What is your vision? What do you want to achieve? The better protection of animals, but what does that actually mean for you and for your brand? So defining the commitment has to be really relevant to the brand and the destinations you visit. Think about those high-risk activities that you are selling and consider what you want to sell and what you don't want to sell. And there's plenty of guidance out there to help you do that. This needs to be fully integrated throughout the business. Don't leave it to one person to decide what to sell and what not to sell, and then have the responsibility to tell everyone else. No, it needs to be a policy that has to be informed and educated and explained to everybody throughout the business. So ensuring internal and external understanding is vitally important. As far as external explanation, keep that short and succinct and say that you're on a process of change. Don't expect, or people will expect if you don't say it, that everything will change overnight. It's a gradual process, of course, to decide where you stand on this issue. Engage your partners in destination. It's vitally important they understand the choices you make, because different cultures have different understanding of these issues, and bringing them with you will often have the change that you aspire to. Think also about the animals involved, the local people involved, because quite often livelihoods depend on those animals and their welfare. So always think about the people involved too. And whatever your commitment is, whatever your output to your customers is, make sure you practice it as well as preach it. Now, importantly, the product needs to be aligned with your commitment. Think about your high risk, yes, but also look at your lower risk and consider the good practice that's out there within the industry. Stop sell, this is the delisting of inappropriate activity, or activity that you have identified as inappropriate, I believe should only be last resort. Give your supplier the time to understand your reasonings, but also to consider how their activity could be modified. This is better for the animals, better for the supplier, and better for the people involved. Stop sell needs to be there as the ultimate action, but please don't do it up front. as we are understanding the importance of nature and animals, I think it's really important to connect your customers with nature. I think the use of stop sale to remove all animal product from itineraries is the wrong way to go. I think people need to reconnect, understand, empathize, and therefore respect nature and animals, which is really the only way to ensure their better protection and ensure that people are there supporting you all the way. Partner commitment and ensuring your suppliers are compliant with your requirements through desk-based or on-site auditing. And then the exciting bit, once you've got your house in order and ensuring that all the activities that you sell are appropriate to your brand and in line with best practice, think about what you can do to enhance nature and the animals within it. So, you know, as far as the climate action that we're all considering right now, yes, you have the option to calculate your carbon emissions, but also think about offsetting that by really optimizing the biodiversity and the nature in the locations you visit. So prioritize animal and nature protection in everything that you do. Support community-based activities that protect animals and nature. And if you have concern over identifying appropriate product, as in activities in the destinations that are actively protecting individual animal species and the natural environment in the destination, ANIMONDIAL has a list of vetted projects that you can use and adopt. And where you have chosen to delist various activities because they're inappropriate for your brand and ultimately are not aligned with industry best practice, help the suppliers to modify their experiences so they remain in business, but better for the animals and better for the people involved. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Please do get in touch with ANIMONDIAL if you need any support and guidance. And we also offer a variety of trainings and support on a regular basis throughout the pandemic for travel businesses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. So thanks a lot. That was very interesting. I don't want to say too much, but for those of you who have maybe joined a bit later, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A box throughout the sessions. This was the first session by Daniel Turner from ANIMONDIAL, and I will now hand over to Prue from Explore. Hi, Prue.
Hi, thanks for having me today. Daniel, as always, that's always eye-opening to listen to some of the issues that we're all facing. I'm just going to share my screen there and hope that works. There, is that the presentation? Lovely. So for those of you who don't know us, we're Explore Worldwide. We're based in the UK. I'm going to spend the next 10 minutes giving you a very brief overview and introduction to us as a tour operator, who we are, and a little look into our sustainability strategy. I'll then talk about our own animal protection policy, some of the highlights of it, and what we're going to be working on next. So we are an adventure travel tour operator. This year we turn 40. So we run small group adventure holidays around the world in every continent. And we've always been passionate about enriching lives through our trips. That's something that's really core to us. We have 5 core values, and one of which is very simply being responsible in everything that we do. And we try to make sure that's really integrated throughout the company in all the decisions that we make. But particularly what we'll look for is being responsible for our customers, for our staff, for the local communities that we visit, and of course, the environment that we really depend on. So we have a sustainability strategy that helps encompass this concept of being responsible in everything that we do, because it's obviously a very broad statement. So for me, I chose to look at the Sustainable Development Goals to underpin this strategy. They provide a framework for us to build a comprehensive, rounded approach. It was the nature of these goals, how they interweave, how they work collectively and collaboratively with one another, that actually shaped our entire approach, our drive to incorporate a holistic approach. So we have identified 4 SDGs. You can see them here. We've got climate action, life on land, responsible consumption and production, and quality education. Now, these are areas that we thought would have the most impact. Within each, you've got smaller targets that we develop. And actually, most targets that we have sit in more than one SDG. So we've got a very fluid approach, because I could work with individual teams and make really relevant targets for them, be that the product team or the IT team or finance. But ultimately, we all have to work together and all our targets entwine. So one example, going forwards, we're going to have a much larger focus on rewilding in these coming years. Now, this is actually part of our climate action plan for number 13 for the SDGs, helping us to reduce carbon by increasing carbon sinks or nature restoration. But it's actually, I think, quite obviously as important in life on land. So that climate emergency and global biodiversity loss sit hand in hand for us, and the solutions that we're looking to employ have to sit hand in hand as well. So this one single strategy of rewilding isn't siloed into climate action, it's actually flowing throughout. But another focus for us, of course, for life on land was our animal protection policy. So we launched our new animal protection policy in December last year, and the core purpose for us is to commit that we will never knowingly compromise the welfare of any animal for the purpose of our trips. We want to protect animals, keep them wild, and otherwise contribute to the best welfare standards in the industry. For us, our customers are looking for authentic and rich experiences. They trust us to get them under the skin of the country and always leaving the natural world how we found it, if not better. So wildlife trips are our largest sub-theme. So we've got over 100 trips in every continent, and this could include coming face to face with mountain gorillas in Uganda or sea lions in the Galapagos. It's very broad. But the customer trusts us to do the right thing. And we're seeing changing demands in the sustainable market very generally. The customers are much more in tune with nature. And there's also, as a result, a bigger risk of getting it wrong. And that could be the welfare of the animal, and it can also be business reputation for us. And these are some of the key drivers when we were reviewing our existing animal welfare policy last year. Last year as well, in January, we declared a climate emergency. And I think, pulling back to my point before, that protecting animals and protecting biodiversity is fundamental to protecting the health of the planet, and not least our physical and mental health for the future. So all these elements combined to make sure that animal protection was a really important issue for us for so many reasons. So I'm going to look briefly at some of the key points of our policy. The policy is available on the website. We've got a shorter version, more almost digestible, customer-facing version, as well as the full downloadable version, so you can see the 6 pages of it. But for the moment, I'm just going to take this opportunity to pick out some of the highlights, what we chose to focus on. So we have implemented a traffic light system, just green, amber, and red. And what that allowed us to do was to categorize our existing product range and really focus our energy and resources where it was needed. We have so many trips, and we have a spreadsheet essentially with every single animal experience on it, and it's overwhelming. So we wanted to be able to break that down. So we can see where the vulnerable touch points are, and we can focus on that. We could understand which experiences need to be annually checked or even more frequently, and actually which we could hopefully not check at all, which should just be ethical by nature. We work with Born Free to independently audit the experiences, giving both us and our customers the confidence in what we're offering. The second point here looks at our commitment to work with suppliers to make improvements or to put them in direct contact with someone that can help. So drawing back to that importance of education within our sustainability strategy, the commitment to that. So this was an improvement actually that we made to our animal welfare policy following conversations with ANIMONDIAL. They were able to provide that independent insight and guidance that was invaluable. And in this instance, that's helped highlight how the travel industry, we can often be quite risk averse, and historically we can make decisions without always acknowledging the ripple effects down the line. And we're guilty of that in the company completely. And I wanted to make sure that we acknowledge that and then we can move forwards differently. So this approach instead works with industry-wide change. That's our goal, brings in collaborative efforts, which is actually really the only way to achieve sustainable change, long-term change, if we're all moving in the same direction. And this element of learning from our suppliers and having that communication and then from us, so both ways, was consistent with the belief that education and a mutual understanding is really paramount for change. The third point here looks at our no contact policy. That was something that we felt was really relevant for us, and that's with wild animals. It was important when we look at how animals can be exploited and how often it can be unknowingly. So that's something that we've included, and that's a change for us this year. And lastly, I've mentioned that we work with Born Free and ANIMONDIAL already, and we also work with Four Paws. Now, this was really interesting for us because they were vital for their input around the dog and cat meat trade and helped identify a new and specific focus for our animal protection policy, which we hadn't necessarily incorporated before. It asked customers to think more about what they're eating. It helped open up the conversation, and we expanded our policy to then include bushmeat and not visiting any restaurant or shop which sells endangered or mistreated animals. And community animals as well. And that wasn't something I'd considered myself before. So that was a really important addition for us. We've always opted for local restaurants, eating local foods, but with the biodiversity crisis such as it is, and the angle that this gave us, it was really important for us to include. So we can now consider what we're eating, where it's come from, the food miles, the welfare involved, and the potential risk from zoonosis. So working with experts for us has been fundamental to the policy. It's elevated the policy from being black and white, almost perhaps corporate, to being one with areas of grey, which is actually more realistic for us as a company and also the industry. It broadens our approach. It brings new issues to the table that we might not have considered, and it makes the policy truly robust, adding credibility and trust. The policy will always be evolving as we discover new issues and encounter new risks. It isn't perfect, and I'm very honest about that. And I want it to be continually challenged. And actually, once the policy is in place, we then have the implementation process. And as Daniel mentioned before, it's not going to happen overnight. It's something we're working through at the moment. And I've got different members of different teams helping understand what the implications are going to be down the line. So we have the policy in place, it's being implemented, and then we have to really consider what's next. So for us, we're going to be investing in new rewilding partnership, one aligned with our own brand where we can really make a difference. We want to continue working with community-based animal and nature projects. So it's that engagement with the communities where we're directly affected and where we're going to have the most impact, whether it's by our industry, our trips, it's all about our footprint. So we're currently building an online training portal for all staff and everyone in our supply chain. It's going to be free to access, and it's got the aim of improving awareness and engagement in animal protection. I really want everyone to understand what changes we've made and why, because I think once you've got that understanding and you've got that engagement, we can really start to push those changes through. So we've also written an animal welfare toolkit for ATO, the Specialist Travel Association, and that was there to help all our peers create their own policy and for us all to make these changes. So I think all my points there, it's what we're trying to achieve is industry-wide change, and it's all collaborative efforts, because I think that's where we can spark the acceleration that we need to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Prue. Thanks. So another insightful presentation, and I don't want to well, I don't, in terms of time, let's just give it over to Stephan Roemer for his presentation. And yeah, welcome, Stephan.
Yeah, thank you, Roemer, and thank you to my predecessors for their presentations. A quick insight into our world. Diethelm Travel has been in the market for more than 60 years. We are represented in more than 30 countries in Southeast Asia, working as a destination management company. And you may ask, destination management company, sustainability. Yes, of course, with more than 60 years, you have a time to also question some of your offers, question some of your doings over these times, and that's what we certainly did. And Diethelm has been implemented a sustainability policy for more than 20 years, certainly being one of the innovators if it comes to sustainable offers in tourism, in DMCs, in Asia. We took a very natural approach, and this is probably the thing which I would recommend everyone. Have a natural look at the environment. We divided it into 3 parts. We took the part of our people, which means our staff, but also people whom we are working together. Then we have the second column, which is our world, the environment, which of course includes fauna, flora, and we have an animal policy, which we worked in that column. And of course, our actions. What are we doing? What are our implications into the world, for people, by doing our actions? So this is how we did the approach, in a very natural, logical way. We ask ourselves, are our products, are they socially sustainable? Are they economic? Because at the end of the day, being a tour operator, being a DMC, an offer which you do has to have an economic character. Are they environmental friendly? And are we giving educational benefits to our clients? So this was our natural approach. And then, of course, you come across to some questions, you come across products which you definitely would question. I give you an example that's about 10, 15 years ago. It was always easy sales. You had a busload of tourists. You stopped at an elephant sanctuary, unloaded the people. Everybody paid his 500 baht and had a ride on the animal. And those who benefited the most were, of course, tour guides, because they had a commission on it and quickly made $250 in 2 hours. But if you look at the whole thing in a bit on a bit from a different angle, you of course see that's not the way animals would like it, and that's not the way how it is sustainable, because there were another 10, 20 buses following, and these poor animals had to run around with tourists for the whole day. And at the end of the day, of course, your competitor offered those tours even a bit cheaper. So it was not even an economical benefit anymore. And that natural approach made us auditing our offer in terms of sustainability, environmental sustainability, animal welfare. And once you do and you look into your products, you will easily find points which you feel they are not in line with nowadays requirements anymore, number one, but they're also not in line with the natural sustainability. With this in mind, as a DMC, same as a tour operator, you have an obligation, because your business actually is bring suppliers and clients together. Once you recognize a problem or a point which you feel is not in line with how we think or how we would like to sell a product, you need to of course talk to your supplier, and this is exactly the approach you have to do. You need to bring in your supplier into the boat, show him how you think about the product and how you would like to have the product, and with that in mind, and of course it needs a timeline. It's not done from today to tomorrow. Be realistic in that. It has to be a natural approach again, and it has to be a practical approach. It needs to be, changes need to be done over a timeline and with a clear goal. But to show you the example again on the elephant, we were able over the years, it took us years, I have to admit, to convince one of our major supplier for those elephant tours 20 years ago to become more a sanctuary where people have an encounter with the elephant, with the animal, and it's more a learning thing than it is a fun part. And in the meantime, also our products, of course, changed that much that we are not offering 2 hours excursions to this place anymore, but we made it like in tours, particularly where we encountered nature or animals. And this can be even tours of longer durations. And at the end of the day, everybody benefits. In the meantime, this elephant supplier, he offers accommodation. And he offers 2 days, 3 days experiences in the jungle combined with the encounter of the animal. I tell you one thing, it's a win-win situation, because they earn more at the end of the day. And for us, we can sell better products, which also attract more clients. And I'm not in direct competition with these cheapest offers just to get out some money from nature or animals. We have to be realistic, and that's probably the approach we need to do first. Be realistic when you want to change something, because at the end of the day, we have to be aware. Again, elephant is an excellent example, because elephant, you find them all over Asia. Elephants, they cost money. Most of the elephants in Asia are domesticated. So for every farmer who used an elephant in the forests before, he can have it cheaper with a tractor. An elephant costs him more as a tractor. So elephant actually has been exchanged with machines which are cheaper, but the elephant is still there and it costs money. So at the end, who stays with the elephant? It's the farmer. And who supports the elephant? It's the farmer. But he most likely will not have the financial means to sustain his animals or to take well care of them, because if there is no income for him, how can he pay for that? And consider that an elephant eats about 300 kilos a day. So that's an expensive part, and all of us, be it in tourism or be it the farmer, we have an interest to look after this animal. We have an interest that this animal has a future, and that's why we should try to come together and find possibilities which make sense for the farmer, for him to sustain and financially support his animals, and for us tour operators to have programs which we feel that's a natural approach and that's a good experience possibly also an educational experience for clients. In tourism, it's relevant to make value to a product, but it's also relevant to make value to our environment. And that's our target. That's our aim as a tour operator or DMC. Make value to the environment. And this, if you want to do this, take a natural approach. Talk to the people who are involved in that line and look what can be done better on a long term in order to have a better value for the environment, and that it becomes a win-win situation. Luckily, there in the meantime are very competent organizations who can give support to DMCs and tour operators on this trail to sustainability. And I can only talk from our point of view. It was a very worthwhile way we did over the past years. We started with sustainable tourism as long as more than 20 years ago. It was a very worthwhile path, because in the meantime, we do not only contribute to the environment, but also it became a part of our business model. And we could not have our success without having our products, which includes excursion to nature and animal encounters. So this became an important part of our business. Just another example to show you, for example, in Borneo, Diethelm Travel in the meantime is one of the biggest contributors to these jungle tours, jungle safari tours, with overnight in the jungle, with excursion, with environmentalists, with rangers. Big experiences for the clients. Not cheap, of course, but it is a sustainable product, because nature can be supported, a protection of animal can be supported, and at the end of the day, we are part of this process. So that's how I believe an approach for a DMC or tour operator has to be done. Not in a not in a fanatic way, but in a natural, practical way to look at your products and then come up over a time frame with better products. Yeah, that's it from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephan. So now that we heard all three presentations and looking at the time again, we have roughly 10 to 15 minutes max left. So I would like to officially welcome again Paul Brungan, who is the moderator for our Q&A session. Over to you, Paul.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, it was a great presentation from everybody here. Just wanted to point out one thing that I saw from the chat, that I think Prue had mentioned 4 paws, and I guess Rebecca had, if you wanted more information about 4 paws, you can see it in the chat. You can download some of their travel guidelines there. Just wanted to point it out for some of you there. There was a talk, Stephan had actually brought up elephants. Elephants have been a big subject, before COVID. There was a lot of different things that were happening. You had APTA that said none of their members could use elephant tours as part of the program. So I want to pose this question to Daniel. Like, tour operators have ceased sale of elephant interactions due to negative publicity. What is your view of these activities, and do they still have a place in tourism?
Thanks, Paul. Yes, as you say, it's been a controversial topic, and as Stephan alluded to, the elephant has been very much part of people's culture for thousands of years, hundreds, thousands of years. And so I do feel that the elephant needs to be part of our culture into the future. And as also Stephan recognized, is that many of these elephants that are involved in the elephant interactions and tours are owned by people. They're not wild animals. They're wild as far as their sort of status, their category, but they're very much animals that are owned and are reliant on their owners to feed them appropriate food and to give them appropriate conditions. So with that in mind, I think where they're involved in tourism, we need to look at welfare and consider activities that whether those activities compromise the welfare of those animals in any way, and if they do, to phase out those activities. So what we saw with the, we had a boycott on elephant riding, and overnight, all the camps, and I think in Thailand, there's probably about 300 camps, something like that, 4,700 animals that are conditioned, as in trained, involved in these activities. And so the suppliers for the Western tourist had to provide something different. And they went into the whole bathing and feeding engagement as an alternative to the actual riding. For me, that causes greater issues, and the change, the transition between the riding and the other activities has actually caused more harm than good, because there wasn't the assessment to identify the risks. And having seen this for myself just before the pandemic hit, I feel that these interactive actions actually put the animals and the people involved at greater risk than the elephant riding ever did. And this is why I am a real advocate of opening dialogue with the supplier to find an alternative activity that's right for the animals, yes, right for the customer, but also right for the livelihoods of the people who are very much dependent on those animals and their ownership of those animals. So we're not out of those woods yet. There's lots of work to be done. And yes, there's a few camps that are held up as kind of how things should be, but the vast majority are nowhere near it. So there needs to be a gradual process of education, support, financial support to help those changes be made. And animal welfare science has to be the decider, not ethics, but animal welfare science. And then we're on a road to redemption in relation to elephants in tourism.
Well, sticking on this subject of elephants, right? I mean, there's a question here that, you know, as there's some experiences where I guess tour operators have less control of. I mean, actually, this will go to Stephan and Prue. I mean, what are your thoughts on including experiences? They said such as the Isala Perihera Festival in Sri Lanka, which includes performing elephants. I mean, they said they're very careful the kinds of elephant encounters they include, but sometimes they have no control over such things like that when their clients are interested in attending. What's Stephan or Prue? What's your thoughts on something like that? If it was sort of a big festival, I mean, would you include it in the tour, or is it something where you leave up to the clients?
You know, okay, of course, it's natural to bring in the elephant because the elephant is part of Asia's community, or particularly rural community. And I just wanted to bring it in as an example. Of course, it's not only the elephant, which is a species to look at or to design possible alternatives. Not only that, you know, number one, again, I think it's the natural approach which is the most important. If these elephants take part of a festival for a day or for 2 days in a year, certainly I would not particularly promote such a festival, but it's a part of the community, and I would certainly not come there and try to educate people not to use the elephant during these festivals, which definitely have impacts or negative impacts for the animal. Not to talk about the noise and all those crackers which they at the same time also explode. No, but rather those people, to involve those people who keep the elephant, and I'm following on Daniel. With those people, we need to look to start the exchange and see what can we do during, possibly in that case, another 362 days of the year, to have a sustainable option for these elephants. So the approach definitely is not the right one. If I come here, particularly as a foreigner, and tell them, listen, that's not ethical anymore. We cannot involve the elephant in your festivals anymore, despite it has been involved for the last 1,000 years. No, that's the wrong approach. But we can definitely have an outlook with the elephant keepers. What can be done for those animals in general?
Prue, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I think I saw the question pop up actually, and I think it's a really good question, because I think for me it falls exactly in this grey area. I don't know this festival well enough to know how much of a part the elephant plays. But if the question is, would we as a tour operator include it in our itineraries, we would have to look into it. So for example, the Calgary Stampede in Canada, different animals, but we don't go there anymore. So actually, because that entire festival revolves around that one animal sort of interaction, we won't do that. And we'll go to markets, for example, where they sell beautiful flowers and spices and herbs and fruit and veg, but we wouldn't necessarily go to a wild animal market. So it almost depends on what the full picture is, rather than just purely the festival, because I think we can't shield our customers from everything, and we don't want to shield them, and we want them to really experience something authentic. So again, I think it would come down to the question as to how authentic these festivals are, whether they are genuinely authentic, because we do also come across some that are really put on for customers, and they and I think that has a very different answer. So it's very grey for us, and we would absolutely, we love including festivals. Our customers love it, but there will always be buts, and we'd have to look into it. It might be that if it's only that one day of 7 days, maybe we just don't go on those days.
Yeah, so it's
I don't know if that answers.
No, I mean it's you know, there's, I said, it's a gray area, and it's a case by case basis, right? And if it's something where it's sort of made for just the clients and the actual part of their history or the culture, then yeah, it would make sense in that regard. I'll come back to something else I wanted to get to, but then I just want to be able to get to another question from our audience here. So Stephan, you alluded to some of the jungle safari tours that your company does in Borneo. What would you say are the main benefits to these in terms of sustainability and conserving the rainforest?
Yeah, Paul, let me turn this question a bit around and take an example of Africa. I would tend to say that tourism is one of the main contributors through its safari tourism for the animal sustainability. Thanks to tourism, they can sustain parks in Africa for animals to have a natural habitat. And this is something I see very similarly in areas of the rainforest. The rainforest is full of life, it's full of animals, it's full of nature, and this is to be protected. And most likely, it can only, I mean, in general, first of all, a protection can only be done when you have the financial means to do it. And most likely there will be a similar development as it is in Africa, that you would have parks, and even more parks, which are well protected and which give a natural habitat to animals. And this definitely can be financed through tourism.
All right, thanks. So I've one more question. Just I wanted to, you had brought up your story about your one supplier that you had sort of had convinced to sort of change from riding to doing sort of building a hotel and doing something more sustainable. What finally convinced that supplier to change, to modify that experience? What actually made them finally to say, okay, I believe what you said, I'm going to change that? And then how can, because the question really comes down to then, how do you talk to your suppliers and really get them to buy into this fact, buy into, making sure that, that their practices are taking, there's animal welfare and taking care of the clients?
Yeah, actually, it's a short question with possibly a very long line, evolving line. Again, you cannot change things from today to tomorrow. But look, for example, if you take exactly this animal riding tourism, I remember times when there were 50 buses in front of such an animal farm. People were onboarding and were queuing to have a half an hour's ride on the animal. And it, for me, came more or less naturally already that people said, hey, what should I do here waiting for the animal with hundreds of others to finally have a ride, which is not even a natural environment. So people were also asking for something more and something different. And that, of course, came all together. You need to bring in, you cannot just bring in the supplier of the animal farm, you need to bring in the tourism as well, and need to create programs which have more experience, more values, and possibly also, it's not then just an hour's experience, but it's a longer experience. You bring the people to the jungle, and you have not only the animal then you have the entire environment of the jungle, the sounds, the smell, and you experience a real jungle life. And this possibly is a better way towards a more sustainable tourism than just say, okay, we don't offer elephant riding anymore, but instead we give them some bananas, or God knows what can be done. No, I don't see it that way, and that's just a cosmetic change. That's not the right change. We need to have a different approach in the tour programs.
Then Prue, what's been your experience when you sort of interacting with your suppliers and their feedback and trying to change sort of their ways?
I tried to give an example.
Sorry, that was the Prue. Wanted to get her feedback.
Okay.
You're welcome to answer as well, because I'm fascinated to hear. To be very honest, we're still quite early on in the journey. So at the moment, we have a new policy, and we are building this like online learning area so that we can really expand upon some of the decisions that we've made. And we're communicating that with our agents overseas, basically our suppliers, and also our tour leaders. But what's going to be really important for me is the feedback that we get, because at no point in my job do I want to be sitting in an office somewhere dictating change. This has got to be understanding what is relevant to the local areas and what's going to be realistic, because as soon as you try and create a change for the sake of it almost, I don't think it will actually happen on the ground. And what we'll then get is feedback from the customers and start hearing of not necessarily complaints, but things that we've talked about in the trip notes, perhaps that we do and don't do, and suddenly they're seeing that's not in fruition on the ground. And I think what will happen is the policy will change over time. So there will be areas where we want something to happen, and actually we get the feedback to say, this is not going to happen here because of perhaps all the reasons that we've talked about. Perhaps the communities are already invested too much, and actually maybe we could look at an alternative. And what I've committed to is in those areas which are almost too grey, or the areas that we are looking to make progressive change, we'll write about it up front. So the customers, when they get their itinerary, will see, we're going here, we think it's great, but for these reasons we're still a bit cautious, so actually we recommend that you do go to this sanctuary and you can see all the animals and have those experiences to get that connection, but we recommend, or we would rather you didn't handle any of the animals, because we have some of those that the whole sanctuary is actually pretty good, but at the end you've got the option to hold a macaw. And actually if we just communicate that up front, hopefully that change will come over time. And I think on the ground then they will just see the demand changing and they can look for alternatives in their own time as well. So it's a big old process for us. There's a lot to cover.
Yeah, it seems like this is not a sprint. This is a marathon.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so we need to wrap up
If
here.
I
So
can-
I'm gonna leave everyone with one final word, Daniel. So I'll leave you guys all with one final word before we wrap up. So Daniel has something to say. So Daniel, you get your first with your final word.
I mean, I appreciate that it is, animals in tourism and the whole kind of which activities to sell and not sell is a complex topic. And do tour operators have time to engage with all their suppliers to modify the activities towards activities that meet their brand needs? Probably not. But that's why ANIMONDIAL is spending time and effort to actively engage with suppliers and also tour operators to help modify the products that are of concern and to provide something more responsible, an alternative response, a responsible alternative to what is already offered. And I think that is definitely the way forward. And tourism needs to be part of that discussion. Tourism is a solution to this problem. And just by removing the issue from your itinerary, you are in effect just taking yourself out of the problem, but the problem still exists. So I think the travel industry has a role to play in really addressing these problems within this issue of animals in tourism, and ANIMONDIAL is here to help you do that.
So pretty much don't just walk away from the solution, but be part of it, right? Stephan, last words?
Yeah, I see it very, very identical as what Daniel said, but consider it takes time, and you have to take this time. And again, you most likely will not have the competence in the office to change certain things. And as Daniel also said, there are organizations which you can tap on, and this is certainly the best way to have those experience and those professionalism of those organizations to support you if you want to do some changes.
Yeah, and we work with many of those organizations as well. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to us, so we can definitely connect you with many different organizations that can help in this regard. And Prue, you get the final word.
I think for me, there's maybe three main points. I would recommend everyone to always aim for perfection when they're looking at this, and I think acknowledge that you probably won't reach it. I would always rather aim high and acknowledge that I didn't always succeed in every area and actually communicate that really well. But we do start by trying to aim high, I guess. But leads me on to the second point, is the patience. And I think what everyone said so far, it takes a long time. And actually going in knowing that it will be a journey of sorts. It will take time, and you will think you're on one path and you'll get diverted off to another, and just that's all quite normal, and we're all doing it. And ask for help. I think just always in everything that I do within sustainability, I'd like to ask for help, because no one person can possibly know everything that they're facing. So asking for help and getting help and taking guidance, I think, has been key for us.
Right.
And that's
Perfect.
it.
Perfect. I love those 3 points. Your first point reminded me of something my football coach told us in high school. but yeah, so this was some great last words, last thoughts, and really great thing to end on. And with that, I will pass this over back to Rue to do a quick wrap up. Thank you very much, Stephan, Daniel, and Prue, and thank you everyone for listening to me moderate this panel. Rue, over to you.
Thank you. Let me quickly try to share my slides again. So yes, first of all, thank you to all our speakers and to Paul for moderating the Q&A session. I found it very interesting. I hope everyone attending also got some new insights, or maybe something that they could take away from this webinar. Once again, if you came in late or you want to share this webinar, it's going to be soon available on the PADA YouTube channel, so you can share with everyone. We will also send an email link to everyone who has registered, so no worries on that. Before we finish it off, we just want to announce our upcoming events in case you didn't know yet. So next week, April 27 to 29, we have the virtual PADA Annual Summit 2021, which is available for registration to anyone. So if you're interested in this, please feel free to go to pada.org/events, and you can sign up for the events. We have a great great number of speakers, interesting topics, and yeah, all the information on the website. Another event, just quickly, this is going to be end of May, the virtual PADA Adventure Travel Conference in March in cooperation with the Philippines. So also on the website, you can see here, you can find all the information, how to sign up, special discounts and all that. One thing I haven't included, because we just announced it today, so I just want to announce it as well. If you're interested, we have another webinar coming up on the May 6th, which is COVID-19 impacts on the Thai tourism supply chain. My colleague will share the link in the chat box. We're also happy to send it to you by email. And I think that's it. That was a quick wrap up. I don't want to take too much of your time. So thanks everyone for attending. If you have any questions, if you want to get connected to the speakers, feel free to reach out to membership@pada.org. We will forward everything. And with that, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. We hope to see you next week at our event, and then also at the upcoming webinars as always. And take care, everyone. Stay safe and see you soon. Bye-bye.